Hi there, fellow sea glass lovers. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm Jackie, and this is part 12 in my 12-part video series on completing a sea glass mosaic on this very large antique window. Now, this is a 12-pane window, so I have done one pane of glass per week for 12 weeks, and I'm finally on the last pane of glass. So today what I'm going to do is focus on how to create balance in your piece of sea glass art. So I'm going to give you some tips for that today. Now, my lesson of the day is that if you have good balance in your piece of work, then a person's eye is going to travel around the piece of work, and it's going to give them a real sense of calm and balance. So I have to tell you, I am so excited to see this piece finished, because when you put a lot of work into something, there's a real sense of satisfaction that comes with seeing a piece finished. The other thing I find when you've got a piece of sea glass art laid down on the table and you're looking over it like this all the time, you're never quite sure if it's going to come together. Somehow it always manages to, but it looks so different when you stand it up and look at it. And that's my first tip. Before you finish your piece, take it, because this isn't finished yet, take it, stand it up, put it on the other side of the room, and go and stand back and look at it. And that will help you determine, is there a good sense of balance here? What else does the piece need? Is it working? You know, it'll tell you what to do with your piece of art. So I have figured out some few things that I need to do in this 12th pane in order to make sure that my piece has a really good sense of balance in the end. So the first thing I noticed when I stood back and looked at this piece is that it needs more weight at the bottom. And by weight, I mean color weight. So if you notice the top is very light, that was intentional because I wanted this to be a very light piece. But at the bottom, I need some weight to ground it a bit. So I am adding some weight with my dark green here, which is finishing off this lily pad. But I also want to use some of my dark browns at the bottom to add some color weight to the bottom of the piece. And I'm also going to include a few rocks here. I have some of these black rocks, and when a piece is hanging in a window, the rocks don't show light through, whereas you do get light through with the sea glass, even the brown sea glass. The brown sea glass hanging in a window is the most spectacular color for sure. But if I have some rocks here as well, then those rocks are going to block the light and it's going to look fairly cool. And I also have a rock here that I want to add. This is a rock with holes in it. If you find a rock with a hole in it, pick it up, because that's a hagstone, which is meant to symbolize good luck. So I think I'm going to put that one in there because it has multiple holes in it. My niece calls these holy rocks, and I had to laugh at her. One day she got a basket and filled it full of holy rocks, ones like this that have multiple holes in them, and took them up and put them in the flower bed outside the church in our local community there in PEI. It made me laugh every time that summer when I walked in and saw the box of holy rocks or the basket of holy rocks sitting there. Another tip for creating balance in your art piece is the rule of 3. So I have 2 lily pads in this piece, so I'm going to create a third one. But this one I'm going to make quite big, so it's going to stand out more than the other 2 lily pads. Now the rule of 3, what happens if you have 3 things that kind of show as similar but different, it does give you a sense of peace and calm in your piece of art. Now this lily pad is going to be quite large, and it's going to stand out kind of like a secondary focal point. And that's another thing that helps feed into my rule of 3 here, because I have the main focal point, of course, is the bulrushes, but I would have a secondary focal point in my nukshuk and another secondary focal point with my dragonfly. So this actually acts as a third secondary focal point, if that makes sense. It makes sense to me, and I think it's going to make sense when I see this all balanced in the end. The other thing is I have 2 of these flying creatures that I've put in my piece, so I want to create a 3rd one, so that also helps with that rule of 3. I also have 3 lily pads, and I have 3 little flying flies. In my last pane of glass, I created 3 flowers. So you'll notice throughout the piece that I'm keeping in mind that rule of 3. So it's taken me a while to find all the right pieces of sea glass for this lily, because I started with a layer of large white triangles, then I put another layer on top, and then another layer on top of that, and then I found some smaller triangles to kind of fit in between to fill in the spaces, because if you've ever seen a lily in real life, they're really beautiful and there's so many layers of petals. So my goal here was to try and replicate some of those layers that you see in nature when you see a lily. So I tried to use a lot of pieces piled on top of one another, and those many layers of sea glass are helping to replicate the layers of petals that you see in a lily in nature. And then I was fairly particular about the pieces of green that I picked out for the lily pad, and I looked for greens that kind of had a bit of a curve in them, so they kind of folded up like a lily pad does when a lily is sitting on it. So I would encourage you, when you're doing a focal point like this in your sea glass art, that you really take the time to search through your collection of sea glass and find just the right pieces to give you that effect that you're going for. And the 4th tip that I would give you to help with balance is to balance the size of the objects that you're creating. So in this case, where I have a bigger lily in the front of the piece, it's going to make it feel like you're closer here than for a lily that's a little bit smaller. Gives you that feeling that it's further off. And also because this size of my lily is kind of comparable with the size of my other secondary focal points, which are the inukshuk and the dragonfly, it helps create a sense of balance within your overall piece. So you have to keep in mind the size of the objects that you're creating in relation to the size of all the other objects within your piece. Because if I was to create an object that was out of proportion with the other objects in the overall piece, it's not going to have a good sense of balance. So I am so excited here. This has taken me quite a bit of the winter to get this piece finished. It's a very large piece, and I've done 1 pane of glass a week for 12 weeks, and I finally finished it. So now what I need to do is I need to let this silicone set before I stand this piece up and take a look at it and do some of the finishing touches. So I know I was supposed to finish this series in 12 videos, but you're going to get a baker's dozen out of it. So I'm going to do a part 13 where I will show you the big reveal, and I'll give you some tips on some finishing touches, so some things you need to do before you can say, yes, my piece is finished. So be sure to join me for that one next week. And until next week, I hope you make it out to the beach, and happy sea glass hunting.